All right. Welcome to Prayer of the Barren Womb, part 15 of the Four Rivers of Eden. In my previous video, I discussed my understanding of Genesis 6, perhaps one of the weirdest chapters in the Bible, where we seem to find exchange or mixture taking place between two orders of creation, the sons of God and the daughters of men. I land on Team Angelic Incursion. And, don't want to go into too much depth, but whatever's going on here in Genesis 6, verses 1 through 4, is very upsetting to the Creator. And as a result of this mixture, the Creator decides that this has to stop. That creation has to be, we have to do a do-over. It's time to wipe that one away and start over with a new guy named Noah. So in Genesis 6, we find it's a transitional chapter. It's a transition between the first river of life and the second river of life. And what you'll see behind me is we're finally getting into some more detail here on these rivers of life. The first river of life, of course, is Adam. His world is coming to a close. The pristine creation that God created on behalf of Adam has been thoroughly corrupted now. It's become corrupted to such a degree that the Creator, decides that it's time for this to end. That if he allows it to go further, mankind will be thoroughly corrupted, thoroughly destroyed. No possibility for redemption. And what we find in Genesis 6 is something else that's very interesting. We find now in Genesis 6, once again, the interplay between the two names of God, Elohim and Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, Elohim. And if we take that understanding that we've extracted from Genesis 1, creation narrative, the powerful judge, and Genesis 2, creation narrative, the compassionate and merciful, loving, connecting being, and if we overlay those two understandings on top of Genesis 6, what we find is some more depth and understanding that may not be available to us apart from those understandings. We find that Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, Elohim, is in agreement with Elohim on what needs to happen to the earth. It has become so corrupt now that destruction, a judgment event, the close of Adam's world is going to be destroyed through a judgment of water. And we find this, where am I? Okay, here we are. Genesis 6, verse 5. Then Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, the merciful, saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of his thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh was sorry that he had made man on the earth, and he was grieved to his heart. So Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh said, I will destroy man, whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, creeping thing, birds of the air, for I am grieved. I am sorry that I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of who else? Of course, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, Yahovah. Then we find that this is the genealogy of Noah, and we find a name change, that we move from Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh Elohim to Elohim. This is the genealogy of Noah. Noah was a just man, which the word there is Sadiq. This is an evaluation, a judgment upon Noah. Who judges? Elohim. We have the name change to Elohim in verse 9. He was judged to be a righteous man, perfect in his generations. And the word there, perfect, has to do with tamim. It means whole, complete, undefiled. So we find righteousness and wholeness are being judged. Noah is being judged by Elohim to be righteous and to be complete. These two judgments are what qualify Noah to walk with God. And we find the beginning of this interesting shape that we made mention of earlier, of a man and three sons. We find Noah and three sons. And we'll develop that more as we go along. But in this name change, it's very interesting because what proceeds to happen in verse 11 through 13 is Elohim makes 6 judgments upon the earth. Just in the same way that Elohim made 6 judgments in the days of creation in Genesis 1, Elohim is once again making judgments upon the earth. And what we're finding is that it's the opposite, that it's not good, that it's become corrupt. That in Genesis 1 narrative, we find 6 evaluations. In Genesis 6 evaluation or narrative, we find 6 evaluations. And I'm going to emphasize them vocally. But in verse 11, we find that the earth was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. So Elohim looked upon the earth, and indeed it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted the way upon the earth. And Elohim said to Noah, the end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them. And behold, I will destroy them with the earth. So we have the judging Elohim, judging the earth. It's no longer good. It's thoroughly corrupt. It needs to be destroyed. We find the merciful one, the Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh essence of God, finding one to whom he can extend mercy and grace. And through the extension of grace and mercy, life will be preserved. And we will now enter the second of 4 rivers of life. We will now enter life again. A river of life, in other words, will be extended through Noah now. Adam's world is being destroyed by the flood, and Noah's world is being started. All right. Now, I've talked a little bit about the interpretive tools that the author with a capital A of the Bible gives to us so that we can understand what he considers to be an emphasis in the storyline. We've talked a little bit about rare, when we find a very rare word being used. For example, tardema. Tardema is the word that we interpret in our English Bibles as deep sleep. This word is found only twice in the entire Bible. Therefore, because of its rarity, what the author with a capital A is doing is he's bold, underlined, italicized, taking a yellow marker, highlighting, taking neon signs that flash and pointing, tardema, tardema, tardema. This is an important word for us to understand. When we find a tardema, that Adam has a tardema, that Abraham has a tardema, we're intended to understand these 2 tardema stories in light of one another and get a deeper understanding of both. Binocular vision. That's one tool that God uses to highlight and emphasize features of the scriptures. Another tool that God uses to feature and highlight is chiasms. And chiasms inevitably point us towards the center of the story. We talked about the first chiasm that we find in hold on. Okay, we find in our cast of characters in Genesis 2 and 3, we find God, man, woman, serpent, woman, man, God. And so we find that actually, in this particular chiasm, the Lord is drawing our attention to the centrality of the serpent. It's an interesting center point for a storyline from God. And we can interpret that. I have an understanding that I've come to about that, and I will maybe get to that later. But what we find in Genesis, moving forward in our storyline, we find Genesis 7 also contains a chiasm, but it's a chiasm of time, where we find in Genesis 7 verse 4, we find 7 days mentioned. Genesis 7 verse 10, 7 days are mentioned. Genesis 7 verse 12, 40 days are mentioned. Genesis 7 verse 24, 150 days are mentioned. Genesis 8 verse 3, 150 days are mentioned. Genesis 8 verse 6, 40 days are mentioned. In 8:10, 7 days are mentioned. And in 8:12, 7 days are mentioned. So we have a pair of sevens being mentioned, 40 days being mentioned, 150 days being mentioned, and that should draw our attention to the central feature which we find in Genesis 8, verse 1. What we find there is the verse, "And Elohim remembered Noah and every living thing and all the animals that were with him in the ark." God remembered Noah in this terrible trial of his judgment. Elohim remembers. And I think I want that to be our takeaway for this particular section right now, is no matter what trial you're in, whether your world is coming apart, whether you feel that you are in a flood of chaos, whether nothing makes any sense right now, I want to encourage anyone who may be in a trial right now that God remembers. I can't imagine that the boat, the ark, would have been a fun place for Noah and his family. Everyone they knew, apart from their family, was being destroyed now in the flood. There would have been sorrow. There would have been grief. There would have been a tearing away. There would have been confusion. The boat would have been a place of hardship and trial, a place of pressure. And the takeaway, I believe, in this storyline of judgment, but also mercy, that wherever you are in your own personal journey with God, know that he remembers you. Know that you have not escaped his attention. He is not looking past you, over you, through you. He is with you. And this is what is brought forward with the Yod-Heh, Vav-Heh name of God. Yod-Heh, Vav-Heh is actually a contraction of three Hebrew verbs for being. The I was with you, I am with you, I will be with you. Past, present, and future are all mashed together to form the word Yod-Heh, Vav-Heh. He is the God of being with us. He is the God who has always been with us. He is the God who always will be with us. And so I want to encourage you with God remembers you. He sees you in your trial. He knows what you're going through, and he is with you. He will sustain you through this storm. So with that, I think I'll leave you with that, and we're going to come back with looking more closely at what took place. We're going to look at the idea of resonance, and we'll pick up with resonance in the next section. Thank you for your time. Hope to see you back.